Hey there! Before we dive into my story, please hit that subscribe button to join our journey for more inspiring tales. I still remember the sting of that Monday morning when my boss called me into his office. His words hit like a freight train: "You're too slow, and we can't afford to keep you." I'd poured my heart into my work, coding late into the night, perfecting an app one believed could change the game for our company. But he didn't see it. He handed me a termination letter, and just like that, my world crumbled. I walked out, head down, wondering if I'd misjudged my own abilities. The office I'd called home for 2 years felt like a foreign land now. I packed my things, my colleagues avoiding eye contact, their pity palpable. Driving home, I replayed every late night, every line of code, questioning where I went wrong. The doubt gnawed at me, but deep down, I knew my app was something special. I'd built it to streamline sales, to make every transaction smoother, faster, better. It was my baby, my vision, and I wasn't ready to let it go. I just didn't expect what happened next would turn everything upside down. All I could think was, too slow? We'll see about that. The fire in me wasn't out yet. Back home, I sat at my cluttered desk, staring at my laptop screen, the app's code open. I couldn't stop tinkering with it, even though I no longer had a job. Every line I'd written felt like a piece of me, a rebellion against being called too slow. I designed the app to predict customer behavior, optimize pricing, and boost sales efficiency. It was complex, sure, but I knew it worked. I'd tested it endlessly in the company's sandbox environment. My boss never gave it a real chance, dismissing it as overcomplicated. I kept refining it, fueled by a mix of anger and determination. Late nights blurred into early mornings, coffee cups piling up around me. I wasn't just coding, I was proving a point. I uploaded the app to a freelance platform, hoping someone would see its potential. Meanwhile, I got an email from HR. My access to company systems was officially revoked. It felt final, like a door slamming shut. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. A week after my termination, I got a notification from the freelance platform. A small startup had picked up my app for a trial run. They were thrilled with its features, saying it was exactly what they needed to scale. I walked them through the setup, my confidence growing with every question they asked. Back at my old company, I heard through a friend that they were struggling. Sales were dipping, and the clunky old system I'd tried to replace was failing them. I couldn't help but smirk. My app could have fixed that. I kept tweaking the code, adding a new feature to handle bulk discounts dynamically. The startup sent glowing feedback, saying their sales had jumped 20% in days. I felt vindicated, but I wasn't prepared for what was coming. My friend at the company mentioned they'd found my app online. They were testing it internally now, without my knowledge. I was furious but curious. Would they see what I'd seen all along? Time would tell. The startup's success with my app started getting attention. They wrote a blog post about how it transformed their business. I read it, heart pounding, as they praised the predictive algorithms I'd spent months perfecting. Meanwhile, my old company was in chaos. My friend said the sales team was raving about my app after their secret tests. They'd bypassed me entirely, using a leaked version from the freelance platform. I could have sued, but I didn't have the resources. Instead, I focused on the startup, helping them integrate more features. I added a real-time analytics dashboard, something my boss had called unnecessary. The startup's CEO called me a genius, and I laughed it off, but it felt good. Back at my old job, the sales team was pushing to officially adopt my app. My boss, the one who fired me, was silent. I wondered if he regretted his words. The irony was almost too much. By the end of the first week, the startup sales had doubled, and they credited my app. I was floored. My code was working better than I'd dreamed. I spent hours on video calls, explaining the app's logic to their team, feeling like I was finally being heard. My friend at the old company sent me a screenshot. My app was now their top-performing tool. They'd rolled it out company-wide without crediting me. I was livid but powerless. I focused on the startup, which was now getting acquisition offers because of their sales spike. They offered me a contract to maintain the app long-term. I signed it, feeling a mix of pride and defiance. My old company's sales were climbing too, all because of my work. I couldn't believe the audacity. They'd fired me, yet my code was saving them. I started documenting everything, just in case I needed to fight for my rights. The tide was turning, and I was ready for it. I got a call from a tech blogger who'd seen the startup's post. They wanted to interview me about the app's success. I hesitated. Did I want to stir the pot? But I said yes, eager to tell my side. The interview went viral, with thousands of shares across platforms like X. People were outraged that my old company had used my app without permission. The comments section was a war zone, with users calling out corporate greed. I didn't expect the story to blow up like this. My inbox flooded with messages from developers who'd been through similar experiences. I felt less alone, like I was part of something bigger. The startup offered me equity in their company, a gesture that floored me. Meanwhile, my old company's PR team was scrambling to control the narrative. They issued a vague statement about exploring new tools. I laughed. They couldn't even admit it was my app. The truth was out, and I was just getting started. The viral interview brought unexpected opportunities. Other companies reached out, wanting custom versions of my app. I was suddenly in demand, my inbox overflowing with offers. I picked a few clients, focusing on those who valued my vision. I worked day and night, tailoring the app for different industries, from retail to e-commerce. Each success felt like a jab at my old boss's too slow comment. My friend at the company said the sales team was now openly praising my work. They'd hit a new sales record, and my app was the reason. I felt a strange mix of pride and bitterness. They were profiting off my work, but I was building something new. The startup I'd partnered with was thriving, their valuation soaring. They invited me to their office to celebrate, and I felt like I belonged somewhere again. My old company's silence was deafening. I wondered if they'd ever acknowledge me. I started a blog to document my journey, sharing tips on coding and resilience. Readers loved it, and my subscriber count grew daily. I wrote about the late nights, the self-doubt, and the triumph of proving myself. The startup's CEO invited me to speak at a tech conference about my app's impact. I was nervous but said yes. It was a chance to reclaim my narrative. My old company's sales kept climbing, and I heard whispers they might offer me my job back. I laughed at the thought. Why would I go back? I was building my own empire now, one line of code at a time. The conference talk was a hit, with developers cheering me on. I felt like I'd found my tribe. The startup offered me a full-time role as their CTO. I was torn but excited. Things were moving fast, and I was ready to ride the wave. The tech conference gave me a platform to share my story with thousands. I talked about being fired, about believing in my work despite the rejection. The audience was rapt, some even tearing up as I described the too slow moment. I showed them the app stats. Sales records broken, startups scaled, lives changed. My old company's name came up, and the crowd booed. I didn't expect that, but it felt good. Afterward, I got emails from investors wanting to fund my own app development company. I started dreaming bigger. What if I didn't just freelance but built something lasting? The startup's success was now tied to my name, and I was proud of that. My old company finally reached out, offering a consulting role. I politely declined, savoring the moment. I wasn't their employee anymore. I was their competition. The tables had turned, and I was just warming up. As my blog grew, I started mentoring other developers, sharing my code and strategies. They called me an inspiration, which felt surreal. I open-sourced parts of my app, letting others build on it. The community response was overwhelming. Hundreds of forks and contributions poured in. My old company's sales record was now public knowledge, and they couldn't hide my role in it. A former colleague leaked that my boss was under fire for letting me go. I didn't gloat, but I felt justice. The startup was preparing for an IPO, and I was a key part of their pitch. I hired a lawyer to protect my intellectual property, just in case. My app was now in use across multiple industries, transforming businesses. I was no longer too slow. I was unstoppable. The journey wasn't over, but I'd already won. My story was proof. Never let anyone dim your light. Block 2. With the startup's IPO looming, I was working harder than ever, but it felt different. This time, I was in control, shaping a product that was changing lives. My blog had become a hub for developers, with thousands of comments sharing their own stories of being underestimated. I started a podcast to amplify these voices, and it took off fast. My old company's PR nightmare continued, with articles calling out their ethics. I stayed quiet, letting the truth speak for itself. The startup's valuation hit 9 figures, and my equity stake made me a millionaire on paper. I couldn't believe it. 2 months ago, I was jobless. I kept coding, adding AI-driven features to predict market trends. Clients loved it, and my reputation grew. My old boss sent a LinkedIn message, congratulating me. I didn't reply. I was too busy building my future. The world was watching, and I was ready to shine. The podcast became a hit, with listeners tuning in from across the globe. I invited guests who'd overcome corporate setbacks, and their stories resonated. My app was now a case study in tech schools, which blew my mind. I was invited to guest lecture at a university, sharing my journey with wide-eyed students. My old company's sales team reached out, asking for training on my app. The irony was rich. They wanted my help after firing me. I declined, focusing on my new clients instead. The startup's IPO was a success, and I was on stage, celebrated as a key player. Reporters asked about my old job, and I kept it classy, saying I'd moved on. My lawyer sent a cease and desist to my old company for using my app without a license. They settled quickly, paying a hefty sum. I used it to fund my own startup. The dream was real now. My new startup focused on app development for small businesses, leveling the playing field. I hired a team of developers who'd been overlooked like me. We worked out of a small office, but the energy was electric. My app's open-source community was thriving, with developers adding features I'd never imagined. My old company's stock was dipping, and rumors swirled of a leadership shakeup. I didn't care. I was too busy building something meaningful. The university invited me back to teach a full course on app development. I said yes, eager to inspire the next generation. My podcast hit 1 million downloads, and sponsors came knocking. I partnered with ethical brands, staying true to my values. My old boss was demoted, according to a colleague. I felt a twinge of pity, but it passed. My focus was forward, not back. The world was my canvas now. Running my startup was a whirlwind, but I loved every second. We launched a new app for inventory management, and clients raved. My team was small but mighty, each member bringing unique skills. I made sure they felt valued, unlike how I'd been treated. My blog evolved into a full platform, with tutorials and forums for developers. The community was my lifeline, their support unwavering. My old company tried to hire me as a consultant again, offering a blank check. I laughed and deleted the email. My podcast was now a weekly ritual for thousands, and I started a scholarship for underrepresented coders. The startup's revenue grew, and we expanded to a bigger office. I was invited to speak at TEDx, a dream come true. My old company's name barely came up anymore. I'd outgrown them. The TEDx talk was nerve-wracking, but I poured my heart into it. I told the world how being called too slow fueled my fire. The audience gave a standing ovation, and the video went viral. My startup's apps were now in use by thousands of businesses globally. I hired more staff, focusing on diversity and talent. My old company's CEO stepped down, and the news mentioned my app as a factor. I didn't celebrate. I was too focused on my mission. The university course I taught was a hit, with students launching their own apps. My podcast won an award, and I dedicated it to every underdog still fighting. My lawyer kept my IP safe, ensuring no one could exploit my work again. I started mentoring startups, giving back to the community. My journey was bigger than me now. My startup's second app was a game changer, streamlining supply chains for small retailers. We hit 1 million downloads in weeks, and the press called us a unicorn. I was on magazine covers, dubbed the developer who proved them wrong. My team celebrated with a quiet dinner, no egos, just gratitude. My old company was acquired by a competitor, and my app was their crown jewel. I didn't gloat. It wasn't about revenge anymore. My blog platform launched a paid tier, and thousands signed up. I used the revenue to fund coding boot camps for underserved communities. My TEDx talk inspired a documentary deal, and I said yes. I wanted the world to know what resilience looked like. My old colleagues reached out, some apologizing, others asking for jobs. I helped where I could, but my focus was my team. We were family now. The documentary crew followed me for months, capturing my startup's growth. They interviewed my team, my clients, even my old colleagues. The story was raw: my firing, my comeback, my app's impact. I was nervous about the exposure, but it felt right. My startup launched a third app, this one for customer loyalty programs. It broke records again, and investors poured in. I stayed cautious, choosing partners who shared our vision. My podcast was now syndicated, reaching millions weekly. I used the platform to advocate for fair treatment in tech. My old company's new owners reached out, offering to buy my app's rights. I declined. They couldn't afford my worth now. My university course was expanded to online, reaching thousands. I was living a life I'd never imagined. The documentary aired, and the response was overwhelming. The documentary was a hit, trending on streaming platforms worldwide. Viewers flooded my blog with messages of support. My startup was now a leader in the app development space, with a valuation in the billions. I stayed grounded, focusing on our mission to empower small businesses. My team grew to 100, each member handpicked for their passion. My old company's name was fading, their legacy tied to my app. I launched a foundation to fund tech education for kids in need. The podcast became a live event series, with sold-out shows in major cities. I spoke at the UN about technology's role in equity, a surreal moment. My lawyer secured patents for my apps, locking in my legacy. The documentary won an award, and I was invited to the ceremony. I brought my team, sharing the spotlight. We'd built this together. My startup's growth felt unstoppable, but I kept my focus on impact, not profit. We donated apps to nonprofits, helping them scale their missions. My blog platform was now a global community, with developers collaborating across borders. The podcast live events were electric, with fans sharing their own comeback stories. My old company was a footnote now, their acquisition a distant memory. I expanded my foundation, opening coding schools in rural areas. The university made me an honorary professor, a title I wore proudly. My team launched a fourth app, this one for financial planning, and it took off. Investors begged for a piece of us, but I kept control. The documentary's success led to a book deal, and I started writing. My story was resonating, and I was humbled. I was no longer too slow. I was a movement. The book deal was daunting, but I poured my soul into every chapter. I wrote about the pain of rejection, the grind of proving myself, and the joy of success. My startup's apps were now in every major industry, from healthcare to logistics. My team was my rock, and I made sure they shared in the profits. My old company's new owners tried to partner with us, but I said no. I didn't need their validation anymore. My foundation opened its 10th coding school, and I visited each one, meeting kids with big dreams. The podcast live events sold out stadiums, and I brought guest speakers from my community. My blog platform launched an app, ironically, to connect developers. It was a hit, with millions of users. The book was finished, and early reviews called it inspiring. I was ready for the next chapter, whatever it held. The book launched to rave reviews, hitting bestseller lists in days. I went on a global tour, sharing my story with thousands. My startup was now a household name, our apps synonymous with innovation. I made sure my team was celebrated, giving them bonuses and equity. My old company was barely mentioned anymore, their relevance gone. My foundation expanded to 50 coding schools, changing lives daily. The podcast was now a media empire, with spin-off shows hosted by my ments. My blog platform partnered with universities, offering free courses. The documentary was taught in schools, inspiring a new generation. I launched a 5th app, this one for mental health support, and it broke download records. Investors called me a visionary, but I just saw myself as a coder with a mission. The book tour ended, but the impact didn't. I was building a legacy now. My startup success drew attention from governments wanting tech solutions. We worked on apps for public services, like healthcare access. My team was passionate, knowing our work was saving lives. My old company's name was a ghost, their failure a cautionary tale. My foundation reached 100 schools, with thousands of kids learning to code. The podcast empire grew, with a TV deal in the works. My blog platform was now a non-profit, fully dedicated to education. The book was translated into 20 languages, spreading my story further. I launched a 6th app, this one for disaster relief coordination. It was used in a major hurricane, saving countless lives. I was invited to the White House to discuss tech equity. My team came with me, sharing the honor. I was no longer just a developer, I was a leader. The White House meeting was surreal, with world leaders praising our apps. We signed contracts to bring our tech to developing nations. My team was now global, with offices in 10 countries. My old company was forgotten, their story buried under my success. My foundation launched a scholarship for women in tech, named after my mom. The podcast TV show premiered to millions, and I stayed a producer to keep it authentic. My blog platform was now the go-to place for coders worldwide. The book became a movie, with me as a consultant to keep it real. Our 7th app, for education access, was adopted by schools globally. I was named Times Person of the Year, a humbling moment. My team threw a party, and we celebrated as equals. The journey was far from over, but I'd already changed the world. The movie about my life was a box office hit, with fans lining up to meet me. I stayed grounded, focusing on our next app for climate change tracking. My team was now a family, with hundreds of employees worldwide. My old company's name was a punchline in tech circles now. My foundation hit 1,000 schools, with kids coding their own apps. The podcast TV show won Emmys, and I dedicated them to my community. My blog platform launched a mentorship program, pairing new coders with pros. The book inspired a curriculum for high schools, teaching resilience. Our 8th app, for voter registration, boosted turnout in elections. I was invited to speak at the UN again, this time on climate tech. My team and I were changing systems, not just businesses. I was living my purpose every day. The climate app was a game changer, used by governments to track emissions. We open-sourced it, letting the world build on our work. My team was now a global force, with thousands of employees. My old company was a distant memory, their failure a lesson in hubris. My foundation partnered with UNESCO, bringing coding to millions. The podcast empire expanded to radio, reaching remote areas. My blog platform was now a university in all but name. The movie inspired a sequel, focusing on my team's stories. Our ninth app, for refugee aid, was used in crisis zones worldwide. I was knighted in the UK for my contributions to tech. My team celebrated with me, knowing we'd earned it together. I wrote a second book, this one about leadership. The world was listening, and I had more to say. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey. Please subscribe to my channel for more stories of triumph and innovation.